Hello and welcome in to this week's edition of the Walkthrough. I'm your host, Intern Joe Macheca. With me is my guest today, my coworker, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jack Veltri. Jack, how we doing this rainy Monday afternoon?
It's disgusting out, man. It's
It is.
disgusting. I just took my buddy's dog for a walk that I'm pet sitting this weekend. It's nasty out, but we're doing good, man. Busy Monday. I knew this was coming. Baseball is starting up this weekend. Super stoked about that. And then obviously basketball is basketball right now. I think if you're South Carolina, you're a South Carolina fan, you got to be pretty pumped about what's going on in Gamecock athletics. So definitely happy to be on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as we await the AP rankings, they are coming out here pretty soon. Should drop around 1 o'clock. It'll be interesting to see where the Gamecocks fall into the rankings because obviously a bunch of people or a bunch of teams in the top 25 lost this weekend. We can run through the whole list, but Jack, first, where do you think the Gamecocks are going to wind up?
So I don't know exactly like who won, who lost, that sort of thing.
Pulling that up as we speak.
Yeah. If you want to kind of bring that up, Joe.
Yep.
But if I had to just go straight off what I think based on what I saw from South Carolina, I saw a team that played a really solid game against Ole Miss. I thought up until the end, it was a little dicey there in the second half, but you managed to get the win against a very good young, up and coming team like the Rebels are. And then over the weekend, you play Vanderbilt. Obviously, the record shows that they aren't very good, especially in conference play. But that said, they really stepped up to the challenge and brought their A game against South Carolina in the first half. South Carolina was trailing going into the break. So they had to really fight back. And I think they had like 47 points in the second half to pull away and get the win, in a convincing fashion. So I don't know. I don't think they're going to still be at 15. I think they're going to go up, especially with like teams like Auburn losing and stuff. I would say they don't crack the top 10. I think it's too big of a jump. I think you would need a win. Like if you beat Auburn this week, I think maybe you jump into the top 10. Because of the teams you played, I don't think any of them were neither of them were ranked. So I think in short, I think maybe like 12 or 13, maybe. I don't know. It really just depends. But I do not see them cracking the top 10. That would take something else.
Yeah, it would take a lot, but again, going through the list of teams that are ahead and I guess behind of South Carolina as I'm going through it. Number 18, Dayton lost on Friday. They're behind South Carolina. Number 13, Baylor lost on Saturday. Obviously, number 6, Tennessee losing to Texas A&M. Number 10, Illinois lost to Michigan State. Number 11, Wisconsin lost. And then obviously Auburn, that's a big one. We'll talk about that too. Auburn lost to Alabama this weekend, which forced a two-way tie now at the top of the SEC. South Carolina obviously playing Auburn on Wednesday this week. A little bit of a change up on the schedule, but that one will be for pretty much the marbles of the SEC. Obviously, you're still competing with Bama, but if Auburn wins that one, you guys are both tied for second. So you have to continue to win if you're South Carolina. And Jack, I was at the game on Saturday. We didn't do the post-game show, obviously, because it was Vanderbilt. My reaction from that one is Colin Murray basketball, man. Shout out to Wes Mitchell for that nickname because it's really, really darn good. CMB had quite a day. I was tweeting about it during the game, and I went back on my Twitter and realized like the last 6 or 7 tweets had been about Colin Murray Boyles. So the kid has, played really, really, really well, especially in the last week. I believe he finished with 31 on Saturday, which is all that and more from your freshman. Jack, walk me through what you saw from CMB this Saturday.
He's insane, man. He is nuts. I wasn't in the building on Saturday, but he is just, you could look at the stat sheet and just know. Obviously I watched the game, but you could look at the stat sheet and that be it. And you'd be like, holy crap, who is this guy? He is just, he's fun to watch, man. He does it all. I was talking about with Tyler Head this morning. The only thing that's really missing from his arsenal is a three-point shot. He didn't take any threes on Saturday. And quite frankly, he hasn't really taken many threes to begin with. But we've heard a little bit about, that he can shoot the three ball if necessary. And if that's something that he develops and can incorporate more into his game, he's going to be the way I described it was kind of like almost unguardable. I think he's got a lot of size. He went he went off on Saturday. That's the point being, went off on Saturday. Got a ton of rebounds, had a block. He just is he's special. And with that said, these types of players do not come through Columbia for men's basketball very often. You get your Sindarius Thornwells, PJ Doziers, your Mike Kotsars. I'm trying to think of other guys, Gigi Jacksons, recent guys. But you get those kind of guys that come through and leave a special impact on the basketball program. And what we're seeing right now is something that we haven't seen in a bit. So I just think enjoy it. And, like I said before with how this team's been playing, CMB, we don't know what's happening after this year. We honestly don't know what's happening with most of these guys. So just I think we're almost watching greatness at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. It was highlighted by that block, man. I mean, he started sprinting down the floor, and I'm like, oh, there's no way he gets to this. And just out of nowhere, with no remorse, blocks it off the back of the backboard and reminded me of LeBron James and the block in the 2016 finals, something like that. But yeah, very, very big weekend for Gamecock men's basketball. I think this Vanderbilt win was good, because it helps with confidence. I mean, you beat the team that you should have. And you beat them in a good fashion, right? I think they slipped into the 1-3-1 there a little bit in that game, and it didn't work too well, but they made adjustments, right? I was very pleased to see Lamont Paris's adjustments. Vanderbilt, Jerry Stackhouse, they ran a pretty good game plan to start. It was really close. You were trailing, or you were beating South Carolina at half. And then obviously South Carolina turned on started hitting shots as well. That was a big factor. You really didn't hit a lot of shots in the first half. And BJ Mack, Miles Studi, Michi all caught fire from three in that second half. And then you have CMB, lighting it up inside. So really very well executed win. Didn't get to 80 points, but you got darn close. 77, I believe, is your highest of the year. And Jack, that is going to be the one complaint on this team, going through the year and leading up to the tournament, is that they haven't scored. They haven't had that offensive outpouring yet. And granted, in the games where they very well could have, and Vanderbilt being one of them, they were 1-3 away. But they kind of obviously took the foot off the gas, did, what they are good at, and, put the car in neutral, so that was a big deal. And just very well executed win. And then also you got the job done on Tuesday night. We talked about it on the post-game show, but, you survived, right? That was the biggest thing on Tuesday.
Yeah, this is, look, the identity of this team is not a high-scoring, premium, top 10 offense in the country. That's not who they are. I think they know that. They are they are a good scoring team. I will say that. They can get some buckets. They got a lot of guys on the floor who take shots, and it really is a collective effort to get the wins done. But at the same time, I think their brand of basketball is a little more balanced. I think they play better defense than they do offense. But at the same time, it's not like one's clearly better than the other. It's a good mesh of good basketball all around. And I think they do a very good job of playing sound defensively. And then they go down the other side of the floor, take their time, make a ton of passes. I was watching the game with my dad this weekend, and he was just impressed he was like, wow, they really pass the ball a ton. And I'm like, man, this is who they are. And he had never watched them at all this year, I don't think. So that's just who they are, man. They pass the ball around. They look for open shots. That's probably why they don't score as often as they do. And it does take a great deal of teamwork to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this team loves to share the ball, obviously led by Talon Cooper. At the helm, the general, Talon Cooper, has been great. I don't think this team is, where you are without him. Jack, walk me through, I guess, what you're seeing with the general so far.
I'm sorry, with who?
Talon Cooper, the general.
Oh, I'm Talon Cooper. Sorry, I was like the general. I'm like, hey, that's an awesome nickname.
It's another nickname. This team has too many nicknames. I mean, my friends, I put my friends on the horse. They didn't know Josh Gray was called the horse, so they found out.
That feels like an easy.
That one's right on the money, but I can't remember what. I think they were giving away tickets, and Talon called himself the general. So, he is. Look, he didn't have the best game on Saturday, but again, it's not even the end of the world because he is just still
so impactful. I mean, he had 7 assists on Saturday, which is good in itself. He played 35 minutes, so he continues to play the most minutes on this team. And I mean, 2 of 6 from the floor, 1 of 5 from 3, 5 points. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but again, he had 7 assists. That's a really high mark, and it just shows that he can be more valuable than just a scorer. Which when he's on, like I keep saying it, he, in my opinion, is the most consistent shooter on this team. Yeah, he didn't have a great game on Saturday, but overall, he's been fantastic to watch this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, obviously we're getting to the point where the rankings are about to drop. Do you have an exact spot where you think the Gamecocks will wind up?
I said 14 last week, I think.
14,
I'm gonna go with 12. I think 12 is
12.
Right where Auburn.
Yeah, and everyone sound off in the comments too where you guys think they'll end up. Obviously, this week not as much hype behind it because the Gamecocks are already ranked, but a lot of potential to move up. And we are also joined by Mr. Mike Yuva. Mike, how are you doing this Monday afternoon?
I'm doing well, fellas. How you guys doing?
I'm doing good, man. I like the hat.
Appreciate it. If you guys want one, head on over to Gamecock Central. Maybe you'll be the member of the day. Shu's been giving some hats away, so if you're not a member already, or if you're already a member, that's where you can get some. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, I just asked Jack. Obviously, we're awaiting the AP poll for the second time. Gamecocks will be ranked for the second time of the year. Do you have a slot in mind? Where do you think the Gamecocks are going to end up this week?
Well, it's tough. You gotta look at who won, who lost, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think with what Auburn was able to do and then lose, it's just like, where do you put them, right? I mean, like there's teams ahead of South Carolina, and when you continue to climb the rankings, I mean, it's not like I'm saying anything that's earth-shattering here, but what it comes down to is you can only do so much, right? At some point, it becomes more of a fashion show, right? It's about style points. So I think for South Carolina, with what they were able to do, at the end of the day, they were able to win. I do feel like one thing that will benefit South Carolina is there are some voters over the last couple of weeks. We know Seth Davis in particular last week, but there were 4 voters, not just Seth, but there was 4 that kept South Carolina out altogether. So I say that because I also think that we will see more people start to hop on the bandwagon who maybe weren't. Maybe Seth Davis, maybe that extra rank, maybe that extra vote this week helped South Carolina climb up a couple extra spots. So, again, it's one of those things. Once you get into that territory, it's like, where do you really see them? I wouldn't be shocked if they only move up like 2 spots. I still, I think they're going to move up. Again, it comes down to the teams ahead of them. And at some point, you can only move up so much each week. But I'm interested to see what happens with Auburn. I mean, you go out there, you beat Alabama, but then you lay an egg against Florida. So that one in particular, I'm very intrigued by, because that obviously is a big matchup Wednesday, for South Carolina. But from a ranking standpoint, I'd be interested to see what happens with them.
I don't think Auburn drops too terribly, though, right? Because, I mean, look, beating Alabama's going to climb, because I'm sorry, they lost. Never mind. Look, Alabama was ranked when Auburn beat them, and Auburn scored 99 points on them. So I think Auburn, what were they, 12? I think I don't know how far they're going to drop, but I can't see them falling out of like the top 20. That game against Florida, I feel like maybe was like, that's a tough place to play. I mean, they haven't won there since I think 96. So it's a tough spot for them.
And to keep in mind too, with Auburn, despite the fact there was a 3-way tie atop the SEC leaderboard, right? 3-way tie between Auburn, Alabama, and South Carolina, with Auburn winning that game the other night. Alabama actually ranked 16th, right behind South Carolina. So I say that because when it comes to the AP voting, honestly, it's like throwing darts in the dark, as I like to say. You don't know what the heck's going to happen because there's really no science to it. I think the more intriguing conversation is what happens with Alabama as well. I mean, these rankings, and you're looking obviously from a net standpoint, all that other stuff. I mean, that's what's more important. I get from an intrigue standpoint, we want to talk about the AP, but I'm more interested to see how the net rankings continue to change. And obviously, come Wednesday, huge opportunity for South Carolina.
So they just the rankings just came out. They're number 11. They have 921 votes. Auburn only slid back one spot. That's interesting. Alabama is at 15. Wow.
Yep.
Wow, that's a little bit of a surprise, I'd say. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, with 7 losses, it's a little bit of a surprise. I would have thought that Bama would have been, in the 20 to 25 range, but they did lose to Auburn. Also Auburn's at 13, right? So, I think that factored into it a little bit. But yeah, I would have expected Bama to be a little bit lower. 11. How do we feel about that, guys? I mean, personally, for me, I think 11's right in the slot, right? I mean, Jack, earlier we talked Tennessee lost this week, Illinois, Wisconsin, Auburn, North Carolina also lost to Clemson. So, a lot of shakeup in the rankings, but I mean, I think jumping 4 spots up to 11 is pretty darn good. No complaints, really.
No, definitely. Like I said before to you, Joe, I didn't think they were cracking top 10. I didn't think they had look, granted, they picked up 2 wins this week, but it was against Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, who weren't ranked or anything. So it wasn't like anything special. Those were teams that you were better than. But I'm more surprised. I think 11's a good spot. I think if you pick up a win over Auburn this week and then they get LSU, I think on Saturday, you should be in the top 10. But I'm more surprised with Auburn. Like you go down to Gainesville, you get beat by double digits, and it happens. But you only drop 1 spot, and I guess that win over Alabama is kind of the other factor in why they didn't drop too much. And then Alabama jumped up a spot. I mean, Alabama they got 99 points against Auburn, and then they I guess scoring 109 points against LSU was good enough to get them up. So I don't know. I mean, the rankings, I don't know how they do it. It's I feel like it's way too complicated. But
one thing I do want to add, fellas, that with this ranking that just came out today, South Carolina, this is their highest ranking since December of 1997.
Jeez,
wild. Pretty darn good.
Yeah,
we're in for some crazy times, man. It's they're on pace to just do things that we haven't seen in even past the Final Four era. It's just this is like uncharted territory for them in a way. But yeah, I'm interested to see where they end up next week, though. I think is the real question, because if they lose to Auburn and then beat LSU, where do you put them? I mean, going to Auburn is going to be tough. I think it's kind of 50-50 on winning that game, almost like Tennessee in a way. Maybe a little bit harder since I think they're getting maybe a 10% chance according to ESPN. But I don't know. I think if you win both, though, you got to be in the top 10. But I think 11 is a fair spot. Shows that people are watching.
I agree. I think obviously you got to take care of business at Auburn if you want to stay, in the top, 10, 15 range. But I think if you do lose to Auburn and you beat LSU pretty convincingly, you're going to stay ranked. Just from the body of work that you've done. Auburn's also a really good team. But, also to Auburn's point, like I think having Florida at home, I think is a very, very big thing for South Carolina, right? Because that atmosphere looks pretty good down there, in Gainesville on Saturday. So having, your big, obviously, I think your last big road test is Auburn. You got to go on the road to play Ole Miss. Got to go on the road to play A&M. But other than that, you're pretty – scot-free in terms of tough road games. But yeah, I mean, I think Florida being a benefit or being at home is a benefit, but then Tennessee being they dropped down to 8. So, a little bit of work for Tennessee, but I would believe they'll still be a top 10 team when they come to Columbia in March.
I will say the thing with the schedule is I think you're right. Auburn is definitely the toughest road game left on the schedule. However, I do feel like, you look to next week, you have a 2-game road trip where you got to go to Ole Miss. That's a team that, could beat you if they're shooting a lot better. and playing a little more defense. But then A&M is also going to be tough because A&M's coming off that big win over Tennessee. So, look, there's no easy games in this conference, I feel like. We saw it with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt had their work cut out for them in the first half and, put South Carolina behind. But, look, this is it's no easy schedule. And if they're able to come out of this with, more wins than losses and continue to play their brand of ball and move into the top 10, things are looking up.
The other thing, too, that's very interesting, and I know we want to talk about rankings, and, they're obviously trying to win the SEC regular season crown right now. I know from a head-to-head standpoint, Alabama's there, but we worry about the popsicle headaches at the end when it's all said and done. For the purpose of this conversation, they are tied right now with Alabama for the SEC crown. Having said that, obviously big game coming up against Auburn that we alluded to before, playing them on Wednesday. Auburn's a game back now after falling the other night to Florida. But it's Alabama, South Carolina, Auburn, and then Tennessee. And with what took place over the weekend with Auburn losing, with Tennessee losing, the thing that people need to continue to keep an eye on, at this point, South Carolina has all but solidified a spot for March. But when we're looking at the conference tournament, and you're thinking about, hey, obviously you want to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, want to have a, great showing in the in the SEC tournament. That could obviously help your rating as far as what your seeding would be in the NCAA tournament. Being able to earn that double bye, having those teams behind you just continue to lose. Even Auburn, like I said, they lost the other day. It just continues to help South Carolina's chances of getting that double bye. That's something else I think that some people are overlooking, is that obviously there's multiple things that we're going to look at, and it's awesome. We haven't been able to do this in nearly 7 years, for crying out loud. So the fact that we're able to talk about all these different scenarios, it's fun. Now, from a team standpoint, just worry about the next game. I think I saw that on the message board. It's like, Johnny Gamecock, 8-2. That's great, buddy. You're not playing, though. I'm not playing. Intern Joe's not playing. Jack's not playing. All right? It's okay to talk about this stuff. It's okay to have fun with these conversations. Johnny Gamecock 3232, whatever the heck your username is. I don't know. There's probably a bunch of them on Twitter and everywhere else. It doesn't matter what we're saying. Lamont, the players, they just got to continue to stay focused one game at a time. Now, if you want to throw on a jersey and, act like, whether you're focused and locked in or not is going to make a difference, then have fun. Put a headband on too while you're at it there, Jordan. But this is just fun to be able to have these conversations in mid-February, because we just haven't been able to do this in such a long time. And like we just mentioned, the fact that this is their highest ranking in the Associated Press poll since December of 1997 just further proves that.
Yeah, absolutely. And 43-3, I believe, is the updated record for the men's and women's programs. Am I getting that right, Mike?
Yes.
43-3. Yeah, that's crazy, right? That speaks to obviously what Dawn Staley is doing.
44-3, excuse me.
44-3. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's wild with the win over UConn yesterday. Shout out to Dawn Staley and the gals getting it done. And a very convincing win over UConn as well. But yeah, college basketball is running through Columbia, South Carolina right now. And, obviously I think, fans would like to see 2 top 10 teams, but again, you're at 11. You're right on the cusp of it. And again, Mike and Jack, like we say every week in all these shows, you have one job, and that is to win. If you were the men's team, your plate is full and it is right out in front of you. You just gotta finish, keep winning, and the rest will take care of itself.
I want to throw this other stat out there too. I was looking for my notes. My table's a mess right now. So South Carolina, as you mentioned, 44-3 right now with the combined records between the men and women's team. For those curious, the 2015-16 season, the combined record was 58-11. 58-11. So that's the best that we've been able to track. 58-11.
Is that just regular season, or
it's everything?
Everything. Okay.
Because the men's team, of course, unfortunately, they didn't make the NCAA tournament. Their NIT run was short-lived. And the women's team made it to the Sweet 16 that year. That was the year right before I got here. But I believe that was the loss against Syracuse. They had an incredible year, went 33-2. Men's team went 25-9 that season.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I know you said earlier, Mike, that it's pretty much all but a lock that they make the tournament, right?
Yep.
I don't know. That season where they win, 25, 26 games and they get left out. I know it's 2 different seasons, and I know the schedule is probably a lot different. But
well, I'm sure you're not the only person thinking that, Jack, and that's perfectly fair to say, because when you go back and you look at what South Carolina did during that 2015-16 season, I know some people will roll their eyes, but I think also some people are going to look at it saying, "Hey, I have PTSD because of that season." South Carolina right now, in comparison to where this team was, right? This year's team is 21-3, correct? 22-3, 21-3,
21-3.
So that year's team was 21-3 as well. At that point, 24 games in. Now, the biggest difference to me, when you just look at what's going on for South Carolina, obviously you got to finish the season off strong. And right, we could talk about, some of the out of conference games that they played at the beginning of the season. To me, though, one thing that doesn't get discussed enough is just how much better the SEC has improved as a basketball conference. I know Kentucky is having a down year for their standards, but when you look at what the SEC has done really over the last 10 years, just the growth, I'd say even 6 years, just the improvements of the conference, it helps a team like South Carolina. I know it doesn't feel that way at times because of the net and all this other BS that, is calculated in. But when you think of the competition, right, the games that South Carolina continues to have these next couple of weeks. I mean, you got to play Auburn, right? Got to play Auburn on Wednesday. Still got to play Tennessee again. I mean, they already played Tennessee earlier this year. They played Alabama earlier this year. They played Kentucky, who at least at that point was a top 10 team. The conference as a whole has improved dramatically in comparison to back then. So I think that's another thing that's going to help them as we go down this stretch, and why I continue to say that they're a lock at this point.
Yeah, and they've got 5 teams from the SEC in the AP Top 25 this week. Yeah. And for comparison, Big Ten basketball, as we're all well aware, is one of the better conferences out there and stuff. They only have 3 teams in there right now. So I think, like you said, Mike, the SEC is definitely a gauntlet for South Carolina. There are no easy games, as I said before. Every game's tough. And, look, I think if realistically, that year when in 15-16, I think they were a 3 seed heading into the conference tournament, and they lost first round or whatever the first game was for them. I think it would be really tough to leave them out if they end up winning the SEC regular season title. I think if they go down to Nashville as a 1 seed, lose their first game, I think you got to still put them in. I just think
absolutely.
That's incredibly tough
to
leave them out.
Yeah, if you're not the 1 seed, and you still have some work to do in the SEC tournament, right? Because you have to win at least 1 game to still be in. I think because if you're not the 1 seed and you lose right away, I think it's certainly a question on if you're in or not. And I think if South Carolina wins out, they're fine regardless of how you do in the SEC tournament. But if you drop a couple of these games and then lose in your first game in the SEC tournament, there will be a question if you're in the SEC tournament or you're in the NCAA tournament. So Jack, I like that point. It does, you have to have some kind of success on the SEC level. Because that happens too, right? Where you are the 1 seed, you drop a game, right? That's basketball, right? You're going to be playing a team that's hot. They've had a couple games or a game or two to get ready. They're getting their groove in Nashville. But yeah, I think your work is left ahead of you.
Chandler Mack of Columbia, South Carolina, over at WLTX. He put South Carolina down at 11. So shout out to Chandler being spot on. Trying to see what Seth Davis has. Was it 12 for the Gamecocks? Which, going from unranked in Seth's, and I know he gave his explanation. We can have some fun with it. But it's a pretty big jump. But again, that's the stuff that we were talking about before the rankings came out, is teams or voters, who didn't vote for South Carolina last week. And I'm trying to pull that up
I think I just saw a tweet, Mike, from one of the beat guys around. I think said that they were unanimously, ranked by everyone, all the voters. So that is look, man, they're getting the attention of the college basketball world. Just it keeps happening. At this point, look, for those who are just still not bought into this team, I mean, at some point, right? It's gotta click, right? I mean, at some point.
With all due respect to our friends over at the AP, their website is
It's a mess.
atrocious. I mean, I feel like it is the equivalent of LimeWire back in the day. Shout out to all you older heads that recall what I'm talking about with that, trying to get music. Good Lord.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, we were trying to update it, trying to get it like right at 1 o'clock, and it's not the best. But Tiger Chem asks how many more wins to secure a top 4 seed for the SEC tournament. I think to do it, you have to beat at least, I think you can afford like 1 or 2 losses in there, right? And it kind of depends on who.
So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You got 7 games left. And like we were talking about before, there's some wiggle room behind them because of some of the games that have took place as far as who's lost, right? Auburn lost the other day. Tennessee lost. The thing, though, that you just brought up, Joe, when it comes down to who you lose is, I mean, that's going to make or break you.
Yeah,
we're going to, not to, do the whole popsicle headache scenario here, but I mean, you lose to Auburn, you lose to Tennessee. Now you're quickly starting to fall out of that top 4. So those are 2 teams in particular that they have to play. Going to Ole Miss is not going to be easy. Going to Texas A&M, to me, is not going to be easy simply because that's one of the further traveled games that you have to play in conference play. Certainly they did well out of conference when they had to go all the way out to play a game that was essentially a home game for Grand Canyon. I'll never forget that. That was a joke, being able to go all the way out there and having to play in Arizona when it was all but a home game for Grand Canyon, but it counts as a neutral sided game as far as all the net rankings and all that. But Florida, they're one of those teams that, I mean, shoot, they've played Auburn very tough this season. I mean, you look at what they were able to do. I think they beat them twice this season, if I'm not mistaken. They beat Auburn once. Who did they beat twice?
Who are we talking about? Florida?
Who did they beat? They beat Kentucky and they beat Auburn. That's what I was looking at. Okay.
2 big wins for Florida, though.
Yep.
Certainly capable of knocking off a good basketball team and a top basketball team. And I brought that up earlier in the show. I think it's an advantage that you have them at Colonial Life, right? I think, your toughest road games, obviously Auburn being one of them, but you got Ole Miss, you got A&M, and then Mississippi State isn't really that's no walkthrough either. But again, I think out of anybody that you would want at home in your last, 6, 7 games or whatever, I think, Florida has the upset potential, sure. And Ole Miss played you close, sure. But, you learned a lot from that game. You saw what kind of team they are. A&M has upset potential, but again, not as big as, Florida. And then obviously you have Tennessee at home as well. So I think your schedule, out of how it could be, I think, you're set up for success. But again, there are no easy games in the SEC, like you said, Jack.
No, I think if we're being honest, I'm going to say, they got 4 road games left. I think they either go 3-1 or 2-2. I have a feeling about that Mississippi State game, like end of the year. Like at that point, I think South Carolina, if they keep at the pace that they're on, I do think they're probably going to end up locking up the 1 seed by then. And at that point, it's just like it's kind of like when you've already clinched everything. It's like in the NFL where you don't play your starters. I think South Carolina will still play their guys, but it's like if they lose, whatever. But I just think that Florida game is going to be tough. If I had to look at if I just pick the toughest game left on the schedule besides Auburn, I don't know. I do think that Florida game's tough. I think Tennessee is also tough, but I think I said last week, I think if South Carolina can just do what they did a few weeks ago and just lock down the guys that you need to, and look, Connect's going to beat you one way or another. He proved that. He's way too good to be stopped. But you can stop the other guys around him. The Tennessee's very beatable, very beatable. So we'll see.
So I have the voters here. I was able to track that down, and it's not going to surprise people because I think a lot of people are going to be happy with the 11 seed that South Carolina got. But it's not going to surprise people to know that of those 4 voters who did not pick South Carolina last week to be in the top 25, as my computer freezes here, one of them has them at 25 and the other one has them at 24, I believe. So I'm trying to pull this up. We could share it with you guys if my computer.
Michael Ruiz says Brian Holland from Baton Rouge has them.
There we go. I'm sure he's up every night watching South Carolina basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Having worked in local TV, I can tell you're not paying attention to what's going on at other schools across the country. Unless you're Chandler Mack. Shout out Chandler Mack. All right, so Brian has him at 24. Then Bruce had him outside of the top 25 last week, had him at 22. So, again, I bring these things up simply to say, look, 11, that's great. Mm-hmm. It's great. And when you look at what the majority of the people had South Carolina voted, between 13 and 10, very heavy between 13 and 10. Dickie V had them at 12. The highest, there were 3 people that actually voted South Carolina 5th. John Rothstein actually has South Carolina at 7. Bryce Cherry. Bryce Cherry was one of the people that kept South Carolina out last week. Bryce Cherry has him this week at number 9. I mean,
how do these people have votes? Like, what?
Yeah. I mean, I get the Seth Davis thing, right? We mentioned he tweeted that at 3:00 in the morning. And I believe I have reason to believe that was a sleep error, but yeah, I don't know how you forget to put South Carolina, like after beating Tennessee and Kentucky, like that, those were pretty national wins. Those were talked about on a pretty national scale. So to forget about that and then have them up, that high in the rankings is, pretty interesting.
It's like, do the people do their research? Like, I don't get it. Like the guy from Baton Rouge, like, what? It's like, it's like, what does South Carolina have to do? But I don't know. Just there needs to be some heavier criteria on who gets to vote, man. I mean, shoot, let's put some of the Gamecock Central staff on it. I'm sure we could do a better job. Like, it is just, I don't know. It's like you're doing a job that determines the fate of the college basketball world. It's like, come on, I don't know. But it's crazy that they're all over the spectrum. It's 24, 9, 7. I'm surprised no one had them like number 1 or something.
No kidding. So guys, I guess looking ahead into Auburn, give me a quick rundown. How do you think the game, in Auburn, Alabama is going to go?
Well, considering they're getting a 10% chance to win on the spectrum, you'd think probably not so good. However, I do think South Carolina is more than up to the task. As we've seen now, no one gave them a shot against Kentucky. No one gave them a shot against Tennessee. I'm sure there's people that were thinking that they weren't going to beat Ole Miss. But here we are, right? They keep proving people wrong, as we've said all season. I just think this game with Auburn is by far the toughest game remaining on their schedule, and I easily could see it being one they drop. I think Auburn's got the potential to outscore them, and if South Carolina falls behind, I think they're going to have a tough time playing at that level of high-scoring basketball that they would need to do to win the game. But if South Carolina is able to jump out early and control the tempo of the game, I think that's probably how they win, combined with their good defense. So,
I think more than anything, it just comes down to playing some clean basketball, right? I mean, you're going to be playing in a hostile environment in Auburn. Obviously, they're coming off a disappointing loss, but at the same time, too, that place understands the importance of this game. And when we talk about basketball schools in the SEC, I know South Carolina is obviously having a tremendous season. But when you think of Auburn, I mean, that's one of the schools you think of, in the history as far as, going back to the days of Charles Barkley. So I say that because that environment's going to be tough. So the last thing that you can afford to do against a very good basketball team is to have self-inflicted wounds. And if you do have some early on, being able just to settle down. And if there's anyone that's good with that right now, it obviously it's obviously Lamont Paris and these guys. They've been able to control tempo. They've been able to control the pace of games. You just need to make sure that you're not getting too worked up. And we've seen that, right? We've talked about it before. Disappointing loss against Georgia about 3 weeks ago, for crying out loud. How were they going to respond that next game? Well, what did they do? They came out against Missouri and they played tremendous basketball. What did they do after having, or is that, excuse me, they beat Kentucky and they played Missouri that weekend. I'm going back to the loss against Georgia. The next game, what happens? You come out and you play a really good game. So point being is when they're too high, too low, they're able to always flush it and go to the next game. This is something that now the target's on your back. We've talked about this over the last couple of games since that Tennessee win more than anything. You saw that with Georgia and how Georgia played against them after they beat another top 10 team for 2 times in as many weeks. That target is bigger on your back now than ever. The attention, the notoriety, the conversations about Lamont Paris being up for National Coach of the Year, never mind SEC Coach of the Year, as long as they don't throw up on themselves in the regular season, he's going to be the Coach of the Year in the SEC. But from a national coaching standpoint, just everything, the attention's on you. You need to just be ready and flush everything. And we've talked about before, Michi obviously, hasn't been playing his best basketball from a shooting standpoint. However, he is a game changer still when he's not getting his shot to drop. He's someone that can make an impact, whether it be defensively, whether it be getting the rebounds, whether it be assists, steals, whatever the case may be. He still continues to find ways to impact the game. If he's able to get some shots to drop on top of what we've been seeing Colin Murray-Boyles do, we've seen, obviously, Miles Studi has done since come back from injury. I mean, they'll make shots. Like, I'm not worried about them making shots, but if Michi can get things going, that just gives you that extra oomph. And against a team like Auburn on the road, you need everything. You need everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, that will close it for our basketball talk here as we hit some ads real quick before we get to baseball. Obviously, baseball season is right on the horizon. South Carolina taking on Miami of Ohio this weekend. We will get to that. But first, let me talk to you guys about our sponsors. First off, our good friend over at Liberty Tax. Tax ID is an uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call on the tax team at Liberty Tax. They're fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents, and when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call on your screen right now. And for those listening, 803-462-5576. Once again, for those listening, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs. Give them a call. And then the show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. You can find him above us on all of our Gamecock Central live programming. In need of help with your mortgage, call on our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyer to the complicated and complex jumbo buyer. Whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance, nothing is more important than a well-thought-out financial strategy that comes with 5-star customer service. He's even helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry North with their mortgages. So give our guy Clint a call. Like I said, he's above us on all of our Gamecock Central live programming, 803-771-6933. Once again, 803-771-6933 for all of your mortgage needs. So, guys, we're going to transition into baseball real quick. But, Mike, I know you have to go. Got something on the horizon, so appreciate you joining us here. Any final thoughts on basketball before we take it to baseball?
Enjoy it. Enjoy it. And it's not to be the wet blanket in the room, but with the transfer portal, NIL, all this stuff, I mean, sustainability is going to be difficult. And I'm not trying to, again, be the wet blanket, but there's, it's difficult. Having said that, with what Lamont Paris has been able to prove in his 2 years of arriving here, it also can bring a lot of excitement quickly. And that's exactly what him, the players, the coaching staff, everyone that's involved with being able to make this program back to where it hasn't been in 7 years. It's a lot of fun. So enjoy the hell out of it. Enjoy this final stretch of the regular season. And before we know it, it's going to be March. But let's see what they can do. Let's see if they have any more magic in them as they try to do something that would be absolutely incredible, being voted last in the conference and then having a chance to win the SEC regular season crown. Obviously, it continues tomorrow or Wednesday night. Excuse me. These Wednesday night games going to be fluky for me. Wednesday night in Auburn. Tough task, but fun to watch this team.
Yeah, going to be a tough environment on the road there in Auburn. Mike, we appreciate you as always. Thank you for joining us. Jack, now we are left to talk about some baseball. First opening weekend at Founders Park for you full time. Excited? Obviously, this team ranked 25 going into the season. A lot to talk about with his baseball team.
I used to dream of times like this, man. No, I'm just playing.
Yeah.
No, man. My excitement is through the roof. This is my all-time favorite sport. I love baseball. And look, I'm so excited to get into it, man. I've been dying to get back and do foul balls with you, man. I'm super pumped about that this week. I've been enjoying doing Jack's mailbag and stuff. And all this baseball talk is so fun. But at the same time, man, I'm ready to just get the games going. You know, these scrimmages have been good to see where the team's at, and I feel like they're in a good spot right now. But man, like, I mean, it's been 7 months since this team's played a meaningful game. So, you know, I think we're in for a good season, and yeah, let's talk some baseball, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned foul balls. That show will be premiering shortly. We're getting that thing up and running as well, and we should have some pretty fun guests this season. There are a lot of good guys signed to the Garnet Trust, so shout out to Garnet Trust as well. But yeah, Jack, you know, right off the bat, I guess, if you will, pun intended, this starting rotation has seen some injuries dealt to it, or the projected starting rotation. We don't know exactly what it would be. But Matthew Becker obviously going down, I believe, with a lat injury, and then obviously Roman Kimball as well, suffering a similar injury to, you know, kind of his shoulder. But both guys should be expected to make a return here shortly. Yeah.
So the word I've gotten, and there may be something on GamecockCentral.com shortly in the coming days on these injuries, but with Roman Kimball, it is a lat strain from what I've heard, and you know, I'm not sure what the timetable is on that sort of injury, but it is a setback nonetheless when he was recovering from Tommy John surgery. And you know, speaking to him last week, I think before the injury even happened, I mean, his plan was to be pitching this weekend, and you know, I don't think that's going to happen now. But again, once he's healthy, once he's back, we've seen good stuff from him. I think the one scrimmage that one of our team, you know, one of our writers was at, you know, I was hearing he was throwing really good. I've talked to a few guys on the team. They say he's been throwing really well. So once he gets back, expect him to make an impact right away. Now with Becker, what I'm hearing, obviously it's a shoulder type injury. It's something that doesn't appear to be long term. It's something that's more just you know, it's more about rest and recovery more than anything. Yeah. And then seeing where he's at from there, because you obviously, with these kind of injuries with anyone, you don't want to re-aggravate the injury or perhaps make it worse than it already is. So taking the time with it. Look, the thing I look at it this way is you have a manageable non-conference schedule. I think outside of Clemson, I think you can get through it before SEC play pretty unscathed with what you have. And that's the good thing. You have a ton of arms that can go out there and pitch. I think right now with the rotation, I think you're going to see Eli Jones throwing Friday, Dylan Eskew Saturday, and then Sunday, I was going to say it was going to be Becker or maybe Kimball, but it's not going to happen this weekend, I don't think, unless by some miracle one of them is just magically ready to go, but I would doubt it. So I think at that point, you're kind of just plug and play. And then with midweeks, it's kind of just, you know, I think everyone's going to kind of get a shot to pitch at this point, and we'll see what happens. But I think, you know, right now, these injuries probably happened at a good time. Just get them out of the way during non-conference play when you can manage, and then have them ready to go by SEC play at the worst. But yeah, I think they'll be fine this weekend without those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Eli Jones and Kimball and Becker were leaned upon as the probable three starters, but Dylan Eskew is another name that you brought up as well to kind of fill in. Is there another guy that you're looking to potentially crack into the starting rotation now that you have Becker and Kimball out for the time being?
So I did a story this morning on basically what you just said, like my thoughts on, what the rotation might look like. My Friday was Jones, Saturday's SQ, Sunday was just slotted as Matthew Becker or other. You have a ton of guys that I think could definitely go in there. I think I'll just run through the names that I personally do think should be a possibility to start. You have Ty Good. He's the next veteran option on this team that can go out there and is going to give you innings. He's been a workhorse over the years with his time at Charleston. But you have other guys like Garrett Gainey and Drake Quinn who are both transfers from Liberty and Marist respectively that have pitched pretty well this spring. But you also have freshmen, in my opinion, that deserve a look. You have Joey Whitting, who I think would be my guy to go pitch amongst the freshmen first. And then you have Parker Marlott and Tyler Pitzer and Eddie Copper. I think that's a great thing. I just named off 7 or 8 guys that can go out there and pitch any given day. And I think that's going to be beneficial with this team is that they have enough depth, I think, to make it through. Now, how they pitch, that's another question. We've seen them in scrimmages so far pitch pretty well and in limited innings. But when you're under the bright lights on a Friday night, how are you going to do? And that's going to be the main question with this pitching staff. But if I had to give a specific guess as to who pitches Sunday, I don't know, man. I don't know. I really like Whitting. I really do. I think he's a good starter. I think Copper's good too. I don't know. Ty Good feels like the safe option just because he has that experience, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and all those guys are certainly capable of it, but you do want a little bit more experience on Sunday to hopefully get the series sweep against Miami of Ohio. I would say it's certainly within the cards. So yeah, Jack, that's pretty much the pitching staff, and as well as I do, the pitching staff. You only go as far as your pitching staff in the NCAA tournament and possibly to Omaha. So I think in my mind, I think this will be good. It's a good adversity to go through. I guess at the beginning of the season, again, knock on wood that you're not dealing with this, in April and May. But yeah, it's good to have kind of this now because then guys are forced to step up when the games aren't as they don't matter as much, right? You want to win your non-conference schedule, sure, but again, it's baseball. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just don't have the best day. So I think Ty Good is a name to watch. Probably my favorite to possibly slide in there. It's Sunday, but they're very high on the freshmen in Whittig and Copper. I expect to see those guys in one way or another, out of the bullpen possibly, unless they plan on saving them for Winthrop in the midweek game. But yeah, Jack, a lot of good options pitching wise, and then Chris Veach likely to be the closure again. That's what Kingston said in his availability last week. You excited about that? Veach was nails last year.
Yeah, he was fun to watch last year, man. He is a
dog.
He is a dog, and I think having that guy at the back end of the bullpen, and the thing with him is it's always been the case. He's not a guy that is going to just go one inning. He can go out there and kind of old school baseball, be a 3-inning type closer. He's a guy that can go out there and throw 45, 50 pitches if necessary. And shut the game down. I mean, he can get 9 outs if you really need him to. And I think that's really going to be good this year. But I think at the same time, you also want to make sure that, what his limits can be, right? Because there's going to be outings where it's not going to be so good. And obviously you don't want to, overuse him too early in the season. And I think the benefit of having so many pitchers is that in these non-conference games, I think especially this weekend where, you might have a blowout because this offense, we'll talk about them, but this offense can be very good this year and score a ton of runs, which leads to a ton of other guys getting in there and throwing pitches and getting outs that might not normally do so. So I think Veach is going to be very good again this year. I mean, his off speed's nasty, and he's a character on the mound.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, coming from Chapin, they call him the junkyard dog. And Jack, he was a starter at PC. Like he logged some pretty good innings at PC. And he was a two-way player for them. But this offense doesn't really need any help at this point. You're returning a lot of guys. Obviously, you're returning the Moose, Cole Messina. Gavin Casas, another one, Talmadge Lee Croy. A lot of your offense from last year is returning. But Jack, walk me through what you're seeing with this offense. And then there's also a couple new faces that are going to crack the starting lineup as well.
Yeah. Where do you even start with this offense, right? You have so many. The thing I keep saying, I've said it probably 100 times now, just talking baseball now. It's a roles reversed of last year. The pitching staff was veteran heavy last year. You knew who your three stars were. It was Will Sanders, Noah Hall, and Jack Mahoney. And then obviously injuries happened, but that's neither here nor there. You had enough guys, veteran heavy, that you could go out and count on to get outs. But with the offense last year, it was a lot of question marks. Who's this Ethan Petrie guy? Well, what about Cole Messina? He barely played as a freshman. How's he going to do as a sophomore? Other guys like that. How's Gavin Casas going to do? It was all a bunch of question marks. But now it's like, okay, your offense is a year older. They did really well last year. You got Joey Holcomb and Monty Lee working together to really patch this thing up and make strides in 2024. And then obviously you brought in some transfers who I think are going to be very, very impactful this year. One of which I keep hearing his name a ton is Parker Noland, who Mark Kingston confirmed it the other day that he will be starting on opening day at second base. He's a transfer from Vanderbilt, played there I think for 4 years. So he's a guy that is a lot of these guys on the team are very high on. I don't know where exactly he'd hit in the lineup. In my original prediction of the lineup, I was thinking maybe like the 8-9 hole. But it seems in scrimmages he's been hitting in the 2-hole. And I think as a lefty bat, that could be very good, since I don't think South Carolina is a true 2 or 1-hole hitter yet. But we'll see what happens. Another guy I'm looking forward to transfer-wise, literally just spoke with him today, is Blake Jackson, the Charlotte transfer in the outfield. I believe he's going to be playing left field for South Carolina. That would seem to be the case. I've been very impressed with him at the top of the order. He's exactly what you want out of a prototypical leadoff hitter, a guy that's going to get on base, steal some bags, move over, and score runs. I mean, there was a perfect example the other day. He went like 3 for 3 in Friday's scrimmage last week, and there was one instance where he got on base with a single, stole second, advanced to third on a sac fly, and then scored from third on a wild pitch. And that was all in one inning. So he is a guy that's going to be very dangerous on the base paths, and I think that's exactly what you want out of the top of the order. Obviously, you got your returners like Talmadge Lee Croy, Gavin Casas. You got Petrie, obviously. And then I think shortstop, it would seem Will Tippett I would imagine is going to be the starting shortstop on opening day.
I would agree.
That's not to say Lee Ellis is a bad option or just –
no, and they're really high on Lee Ellis too. Like they think Lee Ellis is, the future at shortstop. Now, is he ready yet? No. But again, I think, he's not going anywhere, right? It's not like a Michael Braswell situation. They think he is the future at shortstop.
I think so too. And they also worked him in, I think, at second base in some
a little bit too, yeah.
So you never know. You never know. And then obviously Jordan Carrion, we don't have any more updates on what the situation is with that, other than South Carolina already put in an appeal with his 2-time transfer rule and stuff, and we'll see what happens. But either way, I wasn't expecting him to start on opening day. I think he'll be a valuable piece, as he has a lot of experience in won the SEC and then with Florida State in the ACC. And then just I think, honestly, I'll just break it down with where I think position-wise this team's at. I think catcher, Messina, obviously. First base. Right now, I'm going to go Tyler Causey. I think he's been swinging the bat extremely well. And he's just in that competition with Gavin over at first. I think he has been the better guy. But the thing with Causey is he can also play second, third. He can play other positions too. So that really helps him. Second base, Parker Noland, obviously. Will Tippett at short. I would assume Talmadge Lee Croy at third. I think he had a rough day last time I saw him out in action at third, but I think he's been a guy that is pretty consistent middle of the order. And then left field, I think Blake Jackson makes sense out there. Center field seems to be Dylan Brewer. And then obviously the man himself, Ethan Petrie, out in right field. And then the DH is an interesting spot. You can either put Gavin over there or you can put Kennedy Jones at DH. However, I think Gavin Casas is going to be at DH. And obviously, you can have Causey or him at first base or DH. It's literally irreversible. My thinking is Gavin is too good of a hitter to be left out of the lineup. Despite some of his struggles this spring and stuff, I think he is still a valuable hitter. I mean, there's a guy that hit, I think, 19 homers last year and drove in like 65 RBIs. He was the thunderous left-handed bat in the middle of this order that you desperately needed. And he is, when he's on. He can hit the balls a long way. So I think once this non-con slate gets going, I think it'll be it'll be interesting to see. I think it's kind of going to be a trial and error type run before the Clemson series. By then, I think you'll kind of have an idea of, okay, I'm going to start this guy here, this guy there. We'll see what happens. I think everyone's kind of going to get a fair shot as we get going.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up Kennedy Jones. That's kind of a name that, I would expect to see in the lineup to some capacity. Had a really, really, really good fall, but has yet to turn on with the bat in the spring. But again, I expect him as the weather warms up and everything, Kennedy Jones to find his way in there as well. But yeah, Jack, pretty good run down there. Bird Two Fly asked, is PJ Morlando going to be playing this year? Or is he 2025? He's a 2025, and this year is his draft year. So I expect PJ Morlando to be a top 5 pick. But
you're not tearing it down at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So will he end up at South Carolina? Probably not. But I think out of the 2 players that you have that are draft eligible this year, between PJ Morlando and Carson Messina, I think Messina has a pretty good chance of coming to South Carolina, but he was also hitting 98 in the bullpen, or 96, I believe, something around there. 96.
I think it was 98. I think it was 98.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was 98 in the bullpen. So I don't know if we're going to see either of those 2, right? But, you never know, right? Ethan Petrie turned down a lot of money. So did Eli Jersenbeck as well. Pretty big signing bonuses for those 2, but I would expect Morlando to be a top 5 pick and, not pass that up to go to South Carolina. And granted, now would he make his draft stock even higher at South Carolina? Absolutely. Like a kid like that, you really can't take your draft stock much lower than that. But so I don't expect to see PJ Morlando at South Carolina, but you never know.
And you also run the risk of injuries and stuff. And
yeah.
Imagine his velo just goes down or something. It's just it's a tough situation. I'm sure he wants to go to South Carolina, especially with Messina, his teammate at Somerville and stuff. But again, we'll see what happens. I mean, he's still got a senior year to play for high school baseball, so we'll see what happens.
Exactly. So yeah. Ben says 25. Birdie Fly, expect him to go pro as well, but we can hope. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly a possibility, but his senior year, I'm assuming it's going to keep going up, and got to capitalize when you can. But Jack, I guess looking ahead to this opening series, Miami of Ohio should get the job done, right? If you do everything you need to. Obviously, you're in front of the home fans. There's nothing quite like opening day at Founders Park. South Carolina, everybody involved does a really, really good job of making it the spectacle that it is. And Founders Park is usually jam-packed all weekend. So should be a pretty fun weekend, but should get the job done against Miami of Ohio, right?
Should be able to get the job done. I haven't done much scouting on Miami, Ohio yet. That'll come when we get on foul balls this week. But I think this is a series that, good way to start the year. Just is a team that I think you heard of. I mean, right? This is a school that most people have heard of. And I think that in itself is good enough to be like, okay, get off to a good start here, and then let's keep it going into midweeks and keep it rolling. I think it's a good opportunity for a lot of guys to see action. I think we'll probably see a few games or a few times where it's going to be a little bit of a blowout here and there, and that's when you get to really see your freshmen and your guys that might not pitch a ton in SEC play and see how valuable they can be. Maybe some guy clicks. Maybe it's like a Ethan Petrie last year where he hits 1 homer in fall scrimmages and then he blows up during non-conference play. So who knows what's going to happen, but you're right. I think it's going to be an awesome time at Founders this weekend. I'm looking forward to it. My plan is to be there for all 3 games, but with basketball and stuff on Saturday, it can always get tough. But yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the key point that I'll end this show on is, you brought up winning the midweeks. This is something that, South Carolina has done poorly of in the past and not taking care of business in the midweeks. And that's kind of led to, question marks when it comes to the SEC tournament and then Omaha, right, or making the NCAA tournament. So you have to take care of the midweek games, and you've got 2 of them this next upcoming week. You're playing Tuesday against Winthrop, and then you've got a Wednesday game against Queens as well. So your bullpen's going to be stretched a little thin, but again, this is the non-conference schedule, so you should be able to take care of business. This week, next weekend, and then after you finish up Belmont next weekend. You've got Garnet Webb, and then you're on to Clemson. That first weekend in March, the Palmetto Series sneaks up on you a little bit this year. But, should be a pretty good weekend down there at Founders Park. Expect to see a lot of you down there. If you see either Jack, Mike, Uva, say hi. Feel free.
Yeah, come say hi. Come say hi.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But appreciate everyone joining us on this rainy Monday afternoon. We went hour and 5 minutes, pretty good. We covered a lot between, basketball and baseball. It's crossover season, Jack. It's the best time of the year.
Man, it's only going to get crazier from here. My day has already been nuts, and I'm looking forward to it, man. This is where the fun begins, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate everyone joining us. We will see you later this week. Talking Tuesdays live tomorrow afternoon. Then we also have the hard foul on Wednesday. We might push that back to Thursday, TBD. And then, the foul ball, the debut of foul ball is also coming up soon. So be sure to join us. And then we also, the GC Live post-game show following Auburn. A lot of fun stuff this weekend as it is crossover season. But thank you guys for tuning in and have a great week.